watching. So the first thing that I want to do on this week's video is just say a massive thank you. This week has been an amazing week as the Cake Spellings YouTube channel hit 100,000 subscribers, which is just absolutely amazing and blows my mind. So from the bottom of my heart, I want to say thank you so much to every single one of you who've watched one of my videos and subscribed to this channel. It really does mean so much, so thank you. So for this week's video, I really wanted to create a cake which celebrated the channel and celebrated this milestone, and after racking my brains, I thought I would do a baking themed cake. So the idea that I've come up with is my mixing bowl and my hand whisk mixed together in an anti-gravity cake. So the hand whisk is mixing some mixture inside the bowl. So this is the idea. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is work on the board and the structure that goes inside. Now I've just got an MDF board here which I've cut 12 inches by 12 inches. I've also cut some small offcuts, and these are just going to make some small feet on each of the corners of the board, and I've just got some wood glue to attach that. I've also got a threaded rod. Now this one is 6mm in diameter, and this came in one full length, so I've just used a hacksaw and just cut these down to 27cm in length. Now into the board I've just drilled 2 holes. Now I'm going to have the first bowl part of the cake slightly off center, so I've drilled these 2 holes so they come up from the center and will be the width of the whisk parts going into the cake. Okay, so flip that over and attach my feet. This is just going to allow the board to sit slightly off the table and give you space for your metal pole and your nut underneath. So the first thing that I'm going to do is just screw one of the nuts onto the metal pole and then pop a washer on there and push that into one of the holes that we've created. I'm then going to flip the board over and attach another washer and screw another bolt onto that. I'm then just going to use some spanners just to tighten that up. And once that's in there securely, I'm going to do the exact same to the other side. Okay, so now those metal poles have been attached to the board. They are going to allow us to pop our bowl cake on there. We'll then decorate them to look like the whisks that are going in, and it will also allow us to add some other nuts on there once the bowl cake is on, to put another cake board which is going to take the weight of the hand whisk cake. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to do is actually cover the board. Now I want the board to look like a kitchen worktop, so I've decided to make it look like marble. So I've got some white icing here, I've got a lighter shade of grey and a smaller amount of black. So all I've got here is I've mixed some icing sugar with some water to make a kind of a paste, and I'm just going to put this around the edges of this MDF board just so the icing is going to stick. Okay, so to create that marble effect, I'm going to add some chunks of these colours into the white, and I'm just going to knead these together with my hands. Now, once you can see the colours starting to combine, that's when you want to stop. So I'm just going to pause here and take my rolling pin and start to roll this out. Now, as you can see, as we roll this out, the colours haven't 100% combined and we're getting this marble effect. Now, once I've rolled the icing out so that I know it's large enough to fit my board, what I want to do is just use a cookie cutter and just cut a circle out so that I can slot it over the metal poles. I'm just going to use one of my plastic smoothers and just smooth it out, and I'm just going to cut any excess off. So I've just got some ribbon here, so I'm just going to attach that to the side of the board. So now that we have our ribbon on there and the board is starting to look like a kitchen worktop, I'm just going to put this to one side and start working on the first cake for our anti-gravity cake. Now what I want to do is create a smaller version of this bowl. Now I don't know if you can see, so it's got these hearts on the side. So this is the pattern that we're going to go for, but it's just going to be a lot smaller. Okay, so what I have here are 3 cakes. Now the first cake, which I'm going to use for the bottom, has this slight dome on the side, and that is because I actually baked this one in this glass bowl, and this was just to give me a head start to get that shape on the bottom. I then baked 2 8-inch cakes which I have just leveled off and flip this one round and place on top. I'm then just going to use the side of this smaller cake and just start carving down the edge of that 8-inch cake just to create the shape of our bowl. Okay, I'm now just going to flip that over onto the top. So we're starting to get the bowl shape there. Okay, so I've just separated the top off. So I've put it face down, so the top of the cake is sitting on the board, and then I've just got a batch of chocolate ganache here, and you'll find a link in the description below to the recipe of how I made this. So I'm just going to fill and crumb coat the cake. Just taken the chilled cake out of the fridge with that crumb coat, and I'm just going to give it another coating. So here I've just got some light pink icing, which is the same colour as the bowl. But what I want to do is work on the hearts that are going to go around the outside. So I've just got a small piece of white icing here, and all I'm going to do is just roll that out until it's about 6 or 7 millimeters in height. I've then got this heart cutter here, and I'm just going to take a small amount of cling film or plastic wrap, and I'm just going to lay that over the top of the icing. I'm then going to take my heart cutter and just push that into the icing. All the cling film is going to do is smooth out those edges and make them rounded. And what I'm going to do is make enough of these to go around the edge of the cake so that they can sit underneath the icing. Okay, so the cake has just come out of the fridge, and what I'm going to do is just attach our hearts onto the cake before we cover it in icing. Now remember that the top of the cake is actually touching the board, and the top inch is going to be the rim of the bowl, which we're going to put on later. So I'm going to leave that space and then space them out, remembering that the point of the heart will face the bottom of the bowl. So once those hearts have all been added on, I'm going to roll out that pink icing to cover the cake. Okay, so I'm just going to run my smoother across that just to make sure that all my marks from the rolling pin are out, because it's a lot harder to smooth out the cake because we've got those hearts on there. I'm then going to smooth that on the top and just work my way around the cake, smoothing it over those hearts and just getting it flat onto our cake. I'm going to take a pizza cutter, or if you've got a knife, and I'm just going to run that around the edge of the cake and just cut off any excess icing. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do is work on the top of the cake before we place it onto our cake board. So I'm just going to take another board. I'm then going to flip the whole cake over. Okay, so now we've got this. What I'm going to do is work on this area here, which is going to look like the cake mixture. Now don't worry about the edging, because I'm going to cover that with the rim of the bowl, which I'll do after we pop it onto the cake board. So what I want is to make this area look like the mixture, but not be as flat. So all I'm going to do here is take a serrated knife, and I've also got some of those offcuts that I cut off the top when I leveled the cake. So I'm just going to carve into it just to build up some shape. With how that is looking, I'm just going to carefully add a crumb coat of the chocolate ganache. Okay, so once that's starting to take shape, I'm just going to put the crumb coat in the fridge for a few minutes. Okay, so I've just taken it out the fridge, and I'm just going to smooth that over. Now, I'm not too worried about all of the lumps, just because I don't want the icing on the top to be too smooth anyway, because it's got to look like cake mix. Now what I've got here is just some icing that I've covered with a small amount of ivory and a small amount of yellow. So I'm going to roll this out and add it to the top. I'm then just going to smooth that onto the top, just making sure that all those little dents are pushed in. I'm then just going to, using a sharp knife, just go around the edge and trim that off. Okay, so I don't want the cake to look too smooth on top because I want it to look like cake mix. So I just want to add a slight amount of texture in there. So first of all, I'm just going to take a tissue. Now this is just a kitchen paper that has a slight pattern to it. So I'm just going to push that into the fondant just to create these small kind of dots on there. Now you don't want to push too hard because we don't want to ruin that cake that's underneath. And I'm also going to take a small amount of tin foil. Now I'm just going to roll that up, and just with that pattern or texture that we've got on there, I'm just going to roll that into the cake. Okay, so once I'm happy with the texture, all I'm going to do is just go in with one of my modelling tools and just mix it up a little bit so you've got kind of a bit more movement to it, and kind of lines in so that it looks like it's all been mixed around by the mixer. Okay, so now I'm quite happy that that looks like cake mixture. All I'm going to do is just add some different shades on there. So I've just got some petal dust. I'm just going to use fluffy brush and just add colour on there. So now I'm quite happy that this is looking like cake mixture. So I need to add this to my board. Now what I don't want to do is for the cake to touch these poles. So I've actually got these thin plastic easy cut dowels by PME, which I'm just going to put into the cake, and these will slot over the poles. So the first thing that I'm going to do is just measure the cake. So the dips are around 10 centimeters. So I'm just going to cut these poles to around 10 centimeters and have 2 of those. So I need to work out where they are going to go. So the poles are 4 centimeters apart. So I'm just going to mark 2 points, and I'm just going to push those dowels to the cake. Now on the board, I'm just going to fill this gap, some of that leftover ganache, and then going to very carefully lift my cake off of the board and just slot that and get rid of any excess cake crumb. Okay, so I'm just going to take some of the leftover icing, and I'm just going to use that to fill in these gaps that have been left by the tubes. Okay, so the next part of the cake I'm going to work on is the rim that goes around the edge of the bowl. I've got some icing which I've mixed with 50-50 icing and gum paste, the same colour pink as the bowl, and I've also got a slightly lighter one. So what I'm going to do is just roll this one out into a long strip. I'm then going to trim down one side and roll out a long thin piece of the lighter pink and lay this on one side of the darker pink trim. I'm going to trim the whole thing down till it's about 1 inch in diameter. I'm then going to pick up the long strand, and using some edible glue, I'm just going to attach this around the edge of the bowl. Okay, so there we have the rim on the side of the bowl. Now what I'm going to do is just take some of that leftover yellowy icing that we had, and I'm just going to cover the seam at the back. So all I'm going to do is make it look like some of the cake mixture is spilling over the edge. Okay, so now I'm happy with how the bowl is looking. I'm going to work on the whisk attachments and also the whisk. So I'm going to base the hand mix on my Kenwood Kmix, which I have used in some of my videos, and the metal poles are going to resemble the attachments. Now I also want to create the top half of these attachments so they look like that it's coming out of the mixture. I want to be able to see about 7.5 centimeters of these metal bits, which we'll cover in icing so that they don't just look like random metal bits. And you've also got to remember that we've got this little piece here which I can make out of icing. So when I build the cake, I'm only actually going to fill the top half with cake. So when I have the board on here, I want it to sit about 1/4 of the way. So the board is actually going to sit roughly here. So I'm going to screw my nut 10 centimeters up that pole. Okay, Okay, so now I've put the 2 nuts 10 centimeters up the pole, and I've got 2 washers here. Now these are about 1 inch across, and they've got the 6mm hole in the center. Now these are slightly wider than the ones that I used at the beginning, and that is just because I want a wider area for the ball to sit on. So I just want to make sure they are level, and now I know that I need to cover these bits, and these are the bits that are going to look like the whisk attachments. So I've just got some ice in here which I have coloured in a light grey colour to look like silver, and I'm just going to roll this out until it's as thin as I can get it. And the reason for this is because I don't want to add much diameter onto those poles. It's just cut a strip off and then measure 10 centimeters. I'm then going to cut 2 strips a little bit onto the back. And then just do the same on the other side. So the next stage is to make the whisk elements that are going to come off those. So I've just got some gum paste here. Now the reason I'm using gum paste is I want these to dry curved. So I'm going to roll this out until it's a couple of millimeters in thickness, and I'm going to cut out some strips. So I'm going to use the attachment here and just work out what the curve should be, and leave them all to one side to dry. Okay, so I've now got all 8 of the pieces to attach to the whisk section dried, and what I'm going to do is just roll out another piece of grey gum paste, and I'm just going to cut out 2 circles and pop a hole in the center. And all I'm going to use these for is to attach the spokes together, so just at the top. And I'm also just going to cut a line into those so that I can wrap them around the metal poles that are already there. And now I'm going to fix the pieces into the attachment. That's the first one where the cake is at its lowest, so that we get the height for how high we want them. All I'm going to do is just put a small amount of edible glue just onto the top of those, and then taking this disc that we just made, I'm just going to wrap that around, push that into place, and then going to add the attachment parts for the other one. Now on the whisk, when this one fits there, the whisk attachments fit in between it. Do now is use some of that leftover icing that I had from the colour of the cake mixture, and I'm just going to add some small pieces onto the whisk element so it looks like some of the cake has worked way up. And just to finish these off, I decided to go in with a small amount of dry silver petal dust and just lightly pop some on there just to add some shimmery highlight. And here we have the cake so far. So the last thing to work on is the hand whisk that is going to sit on top. Now all I've done is cut 2 boards from a thin cake board and glued them together. Now these are 6 centimeters by 16 centimeters in length, and I've just curved off the bottom. Now if we look at my real mixer, which we're basing it on, my board is going to sit kind of a quarter of the way up. All I've done is just worked out on the board where the mixer attachments would come through. So I've just drilled 2 6mm holes the same distance as the metal poles. So we've got our nuts on here from before, and we've placed the larger washers onto there, and I'm just going to slot the board on. I'm then going to take 2 more of the larger washers and pop those on. I'm then going to screw 2 nuts onto there to hold that in place and tighten those up. So once that's tight, there we have our cake board, and that is just going to take the weight of the cake. Now all I'm going to do is just cover the cake in some cling film just while we work on this cake. Okay, so for the cake mixer, I've just baked a 7-inch square cake, and I've just got a round cutter here which is 6.5 centimeters in diameter. So I'm just gonna cut out circle pieces of cake. I'm then just gonna chop one side off of the cake. I'm then gonna take some of my leftover ganache and just pop that onto the cake board. Now I've also placed 2 small pieces of the plastic dowel over those metal poles. And I'm then just gonna build that up by adding on those cakes. And I'm just gonna trim the edge of that front one off just to make it curved. Okay, so now I've got the shape of that mixer on the top. What I want to do is just make sure that it's curved on the bottom so that when we cover it in icing, it will be the proper shape. So all I'm going to do is just take some of the leftover icing, work down the sides, bevel those off. So I'm going to trim that down and I'm just going to place that on the bottom. Use my fingers to bring that up the side and just shape that. And now that I'm happy with how that's looking, I'm going to cover the whole top section in some ganache. Okay, so now the main body of our mixer has been covered in the ganache and is nice and smooth. All I'm going to do is just take some ivory coloured icing so that it matches the mixer that I use. I'm just going to place that over the top of the cake and smooth it all down. Now that icing is on there, before I put the handle on, I'm just going to add all the details onto the actual mixer. So first of all, we've got a seam that runs all the way down the mixer, and I'm just going to use my ball tool and just on the front put in the detail. I've then just got a circle which I've cut of the dark grey icing, and I'm just going to pop some edible glue onto the back of there and stick that to the end of the mixer. I've then also created this long rectangle shape of the ivory icing, cut 2 circles out, and I'm just going to attach this to the front of the mixer, and these holes are going to go around the metal whisk parts. Like so. And I'm just cutting out 2 plaques, one for each side, and these are just going to have the mixer's name on the side. I'm then just going to use these small letter embossers and I'm just going to stick that on. Okay, so for the handle, I don't really need that made out of cake, so I'm going to cut that out of polystyrene. So I'm going to draw the shape and I'm just going to use some knives and cut that out. Okay, so once my handle has been cut out of the polystyrene, all I'm going to do is just take a sanding block and I'm just going to run that over the handle just until it's completely smooth. Okay, so now I'm happy with how that's looking and it's quite smooth. I'm going to cover that in icing so they can be added to the cake. Okay, so to cover the handle, all I've done is just rolled out some dark grey icing, and I've just got some water that I've mixed with some icing sugar just to make it sticky, and I'm just going to put that over our handle. I'm then just going to cut a straight line into the icing and flip that over. So now our handle part is covered, what I'm going to do is take 2 dowels and just push those into the end. And I'm now going to cover the end with our cream icing. Okay, so now that handle has been covered, I am going to fit it onto the cake. And I'm just going to pop a small amount of royal icing onto the bottom of here, that handle in. Okay, Okay, once that's in, I'm then just going to take a small ball of icing and just prop that underneath the handle until that is dry. I've then just rolled out some thin ivory icing, which I'm just going to wrap around that joint just to make it look a little neater. I'm then just going to glue a button onto the front there and also a switch on there. I'm then going to finish off my board by adding a few pieces. So I've just created a spatula and I've also created a few small pieces that look like extra cake mix coming off there. I have then created some numbers. So we've got 100,000 on there, which have been cut out just to look like cake mix has spilled across. And I'm gonna glue those into place. And as it is a celebration cake, to celebrate 100,000 subscribers to this channel, I thought what better way to finish it off than with some hundreds and thousands or sprinkles. So all I've done is just taken a really small ball of icing and just rolled that in the palm of my hand and flattened that down slightly. And I'm just gonna pop those into the cake mixture so that it looks like we're making a funfetti cake filled with hundreds and thousands. And there is the finished cake. I really hope that you've enjoyed watching me make this baking theme anti-gravity cake as much as I've enjoyed making this cake. If you have, then don't forget to give this video a like. And I just want to say again, thank you so much to every single one of you who has subscribed to the channel. It really does mean so much to me that you enjoy these videos. And if you have any questions about any of the things that I've made in this video, because I know there has been quite a lot of techniques all put together, please leave these in the comment section. Okay,